All right, everybody. Hey, welcome to this edition of NFL Football Talk. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith Jr. This is, of course, an Inside Sports production, our first shows of the season, and we're going to be previewing the NFC for everybody. So we'll see, are the Seahawks going to repeat? We'll find out all about that. We'll see who the contenders and the pretenders are. But, I can't do everything alone. I do need a voice of reason here in my life, and that voice of reason is none other than, you follow him on Twitter at Chris L Sports, Chris Lardieri. Hey, what's up?
Charles, I thought the AFC introduction of yours truly was tremendous. That was even better. I've never been called a voice of reason at anything, so I gladly take that honor.
Consider the source, but anyways.
Hey, there are worse sources, Charles.
That's true. So, what do you think the NFC, and before we get into anything, really breaking things down, who would have guessed that here you have the San Francisco 49ers, who they've gone to the NFC Championship game 3 years in a row now, but really looks like things are starting to kind of break down on them a little bit. And speaking of breaks, it was that gruesome injury to Navarro Bowman during the NFC Championship game, and ever since then, everything has just kind of snowballed on them.
Yeah, it really has, and what's kind of the lurking elephant in the room that not a lot of people are talking about is Jim Harbaugh. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of strife between he and the front office there in San Francisco. Well, I guess now technically Silicon Valley since they've moved, but that could be a developing story. When there's a slow news week and they start leaking the stories, will Harbaugh leave? Will we go back to his alma mater, a college, or another job? I think that's looming as well on the horizon.
Yeah, that's true. And then, let's go ahead and we'll talk about the NFC West here, because that is the home of the defending Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. But let's go ahead and talk about this whole 49ers situation, though, a little bit. I mean, they lose Navarro Bowman, and I've watched some of the other shows, and they're talking about the Niners being as strong as they were, because they did finish out strong last year. Remember, they started out 6-4, and then I believe won their last 6 games of the season. But when you lose, and starters off your defense, Navarro Bowman, and Pro Bowlers, good guys, Navarro Bowman, Glenn Dorsey goes down with a biceps. Aldon Smith is suspended for the first 9 games. Now Ray McDonald is up on this alleged domestic abuse charge. You already lost Dante Whitner and Carlos Rogers as well. That defense has to be taking a hit this year.
Absolutely, you're going to take a step back,
mm-hmm.
And the only good news about all that is Aldon Smith isn't hurt, so when he comes back, he should theoretically be well rested. Now,
right.
That said, I will take a weak 49ers defense over almost any defense in the conference, save for the Super Bowl champion Seahawks. And, you never doubt the ability of Harbaugh to coach or the front office to draft players. It always seems that when one goes down, they find someone else to replace them. You look at last year, everyone was cynical because Crabtree was hurt, and then you look down the stretch, last 6-7 games, he and Kaepernick really clicked and lit it up, and that was a big reason for them making a run. So while I think it's not a good sign, I'd rather have these problems in September than late November or December. So a lot remains to be seen, but sometimes it's good to get the bad news out of the way early in this new NFL.
Yeah, that's true. And then speaking of that and staying in that NFC West, bad news for the Cardinals. I mean, Darnell Dockett, who really I think has only missed like 2 games in his whole 10-year career, and he's down with a knee injury. He's going to miss the entire season. So Dockett's done. Of course, they still got the monster Larry Fitzgerald out there at wide receiver, and, with Carson Palmer at QB. And also going back to the defensive side, Patrick Peterson, possibly the best DB in the league. Richard Sherman begs to differ, but you can't go wrong with either of those guys. But, what do you think about the Arizona Cardinals there? Pretty good team. They went 10-6 last year, barely missed out on the playoffs. Yeah,
they were last year's version of the Matt Castle-led Patriot team that I believe went 10-6 as well and got shut out of the playoffs. I like what Bruce Arians did. I believe in him. I think he's a good coach, and he deserves the shot. What worries me is I believe Washington got suspended as well for PED, so I think the defense in Arizona has taken some hits. I know You've got Honey Badger Matthew, and like you said, Peterson, who, if he played in a major market, would probably be the next Deion Sanders because he can cover, return punts. He's a phenomenal athlete.
Right.
But that's what worries me. I think the Cardinals in any other division are contenders, or at least have a shot at the wild card. But they're looking up at a team that's been to the NFC title game 3 years in a row and the defending Super Bowl champions. So, unfortunately, it's just a matter of circumstance that they play in the best division in football, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. And then, the plight of the Los Angeles Rams, or excuse me, the St. Louis Rams. I was I'm hearing all kinds of rumors here with the whole, but that's a whole nother show as to what team is going to wind up coming to Los Angeles. But St. Louis Rams, looks like things might be going okay, and then Bradford goes down with the same ACL that he tore last year. So looking like not only the Rams going to have a tough season, but maybe Bradford's stay in St. Louis is over as well.
I think it is. And, I going into the last couple of weeks, and Charles, thank you for scheduling these preview shows so late, because as you so aptly predicted, you said a blown ACL between now and then, and there was. I thought the Rams were a team that can make the leap. I thought they could potentially be this year's Cardinals, and then this happened. And then I sat and thought about it, and in my old age and my wisdom, I realized everyone loves to overreact for a good day or two. And then when you sit and think about it and some clarity comes in, is Sean Hill that much worse than Sam Bradford? Because let's face it, Bradford's had a number of injuries. Even when healthy, he never materialized into the top pick that everyone thought he would. So, Sean Hill's decent. There are a few other quarterbacks I think I'd rather have running my team right now, like Josh McCown, for instance. But, is he that much worse? I think the Rams have a tremendously underrated defense. Nick Stacy's an excellent receiver. Trevon Austin's going to be, I think, a player in the making down the road. I think there's still some hope there. However, they're in the, I don't know if they're in the NFC North or NFC South, or definitely in the NFC East. They're a playoff team, possibly, but again, they could easily have a great season, go 8-8, 9-7, and still be at home with you and I watching in January.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes down to it, now we've taken a good objective look at everybody. Any reason to think, especially with the Niners going through all their problems, it looks like that Seattle is kind of a shoo-in, even though I think Seattle losing Browner off the defense and Marshawn Lynch in that pseudo weird holdout. We don't know where his head is really going to be, because this is probably his last year as a member of the Seahawks, so that could factor in as well. But looking at everything else going on, any reason to think that Seattle really doesn't just really run away with the division here?
I think there's a good chance to win it again. I don't think they're going to run away with it.
Okay.
There are a couple of reasons. I think Russell Wilson had a phenomenal year. Can he do it again? Possibly. We'll see. I think, and this isn't a huge subtraction, but he's going to miss Golden Tate. Lynch isn't the running back he was. Is he a little disgruntled? Not sure. What really worries me are two things. One, everyone guns for you when you're Super Bowl champs, and the stat does not lie. The last 8 Super Bowl champs did not win a playoff game the following year.
Isn't that incredible?
I literally couldn't believe it. I had to go back and think and say, wow, that's the case. A lot of first-round exits are missing the playoffs altogether. So the part two is the topic of discussion that ESPN's like to talk about third most after Johnny Manziel and Michael Sam showering habits, which is the new restrictive pass defending rules, I'll call them, where you so much as lay a finger on a receiver, it's going to be a hold. They're trying to crack down on the way the Seahawks corners and safeties clamped down on everyone last year, especially in the Super Bowl. You can call it the Richard Sherman rule, whatever you like. And they've called a ton of flags in the preseason. They're testing it out, but who's to say that couldn't be the difference between them winning a game or two and potentially making this race a little more interesting. On top of that, the Seahawks are a phenomenal team. They deserve to win the Super Bowl. But let's face it, I was sitting there watching that NFC Championship game, seeing Kaepernick march down the field, dunk the ball over the middle. The Seahawks were afraid he was going to take off on his feet. And I turned to my wife and I said, holy crap, the 49ers are going to win it here. And sure enough, Jim Harbaugh calls a pass over to Sherman's side, much like the Super Bowl 2 years ago, looking for Crabtree, and a tip pass, and the game's over, and Richard Sherman screaming at Aaron Andrews. The 49ers were that close to winning that game. The Seahawks let them back into it. So everyone likes to think, wow, they spanked the 49ers the second week of the season, or they beat them 3 times. They beat them 3 times. They could sweep them again this year. No, I think that the 49ers and Seahawks are going to duke it out again. But that said, I wouldn't be surprised if the Seahawks win the division.
Yeah, so making picks, I got to go with the Seahawks, looking at all the turmoil with the other teams, with injuries and whatnot, and especially the Niners situation. I think the Seahawks are going to win this thing again. This division, anyways.
Yes.
All right, so you know what? Let's move over to one of the the more extremely interesting divisions, and that is the NFC East. Tony Romo, RG3, Eli Manning, Nick Foles, everybody over there, all those quarterbacks. And you got 2 quarterbacks, to me, the guys, other than Eli, but Eli has his 2 rings, but the guys with something to prove here. Tony Romo coming back off the back surgery, and then also RG3 having a really bad year last year. I mean, they lost their last 8 games. The coach gets tossed out. Now Jay Gruden is there. But I liked RG3 when he came in. I liked a lot of the things that he said, especially about wanting to establish himself as not just like a running QB, but he said, instead of saying I'm going to be another Michael Vick or Randall Cunningham, why can't I be another John Elway? And that really impressed me. But now it seems like his real ego is starting to seep in. So I'm interested to see with RG3 what he's going to do this year.
This is clearly a make-or-break year for him. I mean, you're even hearing the rumblings coming out of D.C. where people are calling for Kirk Cousins to start. And
right.
He played well in place of Griffin. I will give him that. He's not the physical talent that Griffin is, but at the same time, who thought Russell Wilson was? I mean, Russell Wilson's an excellent quarterback, but a year ago, no one thought he had the potential to lead the Seahawks to a Super Bowl title.
Right.
So stranger things have happened. What worries me about Griffin is exactly what you said, his ego. And he makes comments about, well, everyone doubts me and I'm going to prove them wrong. And then he goes out there on the field and the guy's still taking a beating and he still doesn't know how to slide and he still doesn't know when to get rid of the ball as opposed to try and run it. And I think it's, as much as it is mentally, I'm physically worried about him taking another crack, whether it's, he gets knocked out of a game or rips up his knee again. We saw it with Sam Bradford.
Yeah, it's true, and RG3 just is not a big guy. He's elusive, but he's not that big. And I liked Kirk Cousins too when he started. He's kind of a classic quarterback, and my measuring point for quarterbacks is Brad Johnson. So when I look at a guy, I always say, would he be as good, or that's the line where if you're going to be able to quarterback a contender or championship team, you got to be at least as good as Brad Johnson was. And I think, Kirk Cousins, he's creeping up into that area maybe.
Yeah, he could be the decade's version of the Redskins' Mark Rippon. How about that?
Oh, dear Lord. Anyways, okay, so let's go ahead and move on.
He's got a ring. And by the way, I said Redskins. Is that going to get me in trouble with anyone? I let it.
You're not in trouble with me. You're good with me. I'll take the heat. Don't worry.
Good.
Okay, so going to your your squad there, the New York Giants, Rashad Jennings coming over from the Raiders. So he's going to be Eli's new go-to guy in the backfield. Eli Manning looking to get back on track. I think he's thrown like 42 interceptions over the last 2 seasons, which is pretty much horrendous. But we all know Eli can bounce back. But new offensive coordinator this year. How do you see things going there for the Giants?
You know how I think. I'm never a Giants homer, but the one thing that never seems to fail in the Tom Coughlin era is that when the media vultures are circling and cynicism's at an all-time high, that's when I get excited for a Giants season. And I was starting to head that route until I sat down and actually watched the Jets-Giants preseason game, and I just don't think Eli's grasped Ben McAdoo's offense. I don't know that he has the weapons save for Victor Cruz. I mean, Jennings is a nice addition, considering they had a backfield of nobodies last year.
Right.
Watch out for Andre Williams, draft pick out of Boston College. I think he could be a nice runner. But what worries me is the offensive line again. And Jeff Schwartz, one of their key free agents they signed, a guard, went down with a dislocated toe. And I saw a lot of the same Eli under pressure, not knowing what to do, throwing the ball away, forcing balls. He actually forced an interception. He got lucky. On review, the Jets defender was out of bounds, and it worries me. And unless Eli's in that 2-minute offense, where he doesn't have to think and he can just run bang, 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 play after play.
Right.
I'm not seeing the old Eli on the defensive side of the ball. I know they had some injuries in the secondary. John Beeson's back at linebacker, but really Jason Pierre-Paul and a bunch of other guys, and that worries me just as much. And any other year, I think they'd have a shot to win the division with the usual 9-7 record. But I hate to jump on the cynicism bandwagon, but I think there may be something to it here this year.
Yeah, and you know what? In the Giants are in, like you said, that familiar position. And honestly, we don't know. Who knows after maybe 3 or 4 games, everything comes together for Eli on the offense and they start rolling. We don't know. And that's why it's going to be hard to really judge them, I think, until I'd let them get 4 regular season games under their belt. And it'll be, easy to say, even though I know we have to do the show now and not a month from now. But it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think at the end of the day, they will turn it around. It won't be as bad as it is, but will that be enough to win the division? I don't know.
Yeah, and remember last year they started off by, I think they won only one of their first 7 games or something horrendous like that, and then they played decent ball down the stretch. But, let's talk about the Eagles a little bit. The Eagles, the main thing, Deshaun Jackson, who's gone. In fact, Deshaun Jackson is now a Redskin, so he'll be stretching the field for RG3 there, but they do wind up getting Darren Sproles, good back out of the backfield, good multi-purpose. But even there, they look like clearly the best team in this division. However, you got Nick Foles, who's, just going into it's going to be his second year as a starter. So we'll see. The defensive coordinators have studied him now, and is Nick Foles going to be as effective as he was, towards the end of last season?
Yeah, I don't think he will. I think it's reminiscent of the great year Vic had in Philadelphia, and then the next year defense is keyed on him. Different kind of quarterback, but similar Philly analogy.
Right, sure.
I think they will take a step back. I think they'll miss Jackson, albeit he was a malcontent at times and didn't produce like he once did. You still had the key on him, so he was a great decoy at the very least. I don't think, I think Foles will clearly throw more interceptions. I do like the Sproles addition. I think Chip Kelly's going to be an excellent coach. But the good news for them in this division, they have an off year and go 9-7. They could win the division by 2 games. So I just think they're in the right place at the right time, and I hate to do it given my Giants blue blood, but I think it's just kind of the lesser of all evils. Philly's got to be the front runner right now.
Yeah, and they did go 10-6 last year, but 9-7 would have won the division for them.
Yeah.
So I gotta agree with you there. I think, and there's going to be some ugly games here, and I think there's going to be some turmoil, especially I think in DC. It's going to get ugly. The Giants, it might not, but I think that's a tough situation in DC with Jay Gruden to be thrown into, with the whole RG3 thing where, basically RG3 ran Mike Shanahan out of town. So we don't know what's going to happen there. So he better hope that whole thing clicks. Now, the big question, and I got to get this to you here. We know that since 1997, the Dallas Cowboys are an even 136 and 136 during the regular season. The last 3 seasons, the Cowboys have been 8-8. So right now, here we are in Vegas. The over-under on the Dallas Cowboys is 7.5 wins this season. Mr. Lardieri, where are you putting your money? The over or the under?
I'm putting the house on the under. I think even if the Cowboys have a solid year, 7-9 is the best they can do. Romo coming off surgery, other than Des Bryant, what weapons does he really have? The defense has been completely decimated by injuries. Marcus Ware left free agency.
Right.
Not that he's the second coming of Bruce Smith, but they're going to miss him. The secondary routinely gets torched. I mean, we're looking at a cellar door team here. The media vultures I referred to will move their attention down to Dallas, circle Jason Garrett, poor guy, who by November will be in the firing line, and Jerry Jones, when he's not busy with blondes that are shaking him down for money, taking pictures of him, will start leaking all sorts of rumors about John Gruden, Bill Cowher, whoever, next name, etc.
So, yeah, and I got to go with, I would take the under this season with them too. And we never know. Who knows? It'll give Jerry Jones a little bit more time to not talk to Adrian Peterson on the phone.
That's right. Every week there's a good Jerry story, and I heard that one today, and I don't know whether to laugh or shake my head.
Right, exactly. But we can be in agreement here. We're both going with the Eagles in the division.
Unfortunately, we are.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead to the north, and we talk about a little bit of a weak division here, even though they've got the Packers just a few years removed from the Super Bowl win. But Aaron Rodgers and his Packers won this last year at 8-7-1, and then you had Detroit at 8-8. Chicago 8-8, Detroit 7-9, and then Minnesota at 5-10-1. So, what do you see here with the Packers? I mean, is there any reason to think they're going to be any stronger this year? I think it looks like they have some of the same type of problems. Rodgers is still an excellent QB, and I think probably the most talented QB in the league at this very moment. But the questions on, a little bit at running back, questions on the defense, though, at actually all three levels. And B.J. Raji is out for the season as well.
Yeah, I think this is another case of a division ripe with mediocrity or just above the 500 mark. I think the one thing the Packers have going for them, and you make a great point about Raji, they're going to miss him on an already weakened defense. But Aaron Rodgers got hurt last year. Had not, they probably run away with that division. It's not as close as it was. And I think that's their best asset. You look at Jordy Nelson, Eddie Lacy's really emerging to his own as a running back. I think in a division like this, you've got a quality offense and an excellent quarterback. I think that could be enough to win this division.
Yeah, I think so. And then we, talking about the Bears, everybody seems to think that this is going to be a big year for Jay Cutler for whatever reason. But the Bears, maybe Jared Allen coming over, to shore up the defense a little bit there. But hey, so what do you think of the Bears this year, though?
I don't think much. I mean, you look back last year when Cutler was out, Josh McCown stepped in and did a nice job. But yet again, when the game's on the line, the playoffs are on the line, did Cutler lead the Bears to a win? No, I know it wasn't all his fault. I mean, you can't let wide open Packers receivers slip behind you as a secondary. But right. Cutler got his money. The Chicago media, he's become one of their favorite whipping boys, and deservedly so at times, and I just don't have the confidence in him. Trestman did a nice job. I mean, he played a lot better. You look at Jeffries emerging as a top wide receiver. Brandon Marshall's still there, albeit he's a year older. I think he lost a step. But what goes back to ultimately for them is the defensive side of the ball. They're not the Brian Urlacher Bears defense. Jared Allen, nice addition, but let's face it, he wasn't the player he was. Minnesota let him go for a reason. The aforementioned secondary getting burned too much. And I could see them being another 8-18 this year at best. So I don't think really Chicago did anything that outstanding to differentiate themselves from the Packers.
Yep, and then the other team, Detroit Lions, started off pretty well. They just had a mediocre season, and now we look at what's going on there. Calvin Johnson, but it's still a good receiver. But Matt Stafford, and then also you've got on the defense, Ndamukong Suh has not been offered another contract, and rumor has it he's going to leave as a free agent at the end of the season. So maybe that gives him some added incentive to play this year, or maybe not if he cops a little bit of an attitude, because Suh is going to get paid by somebody, next season. Really, kind of almost no matter what he does this year. So maybe a little bit of a transition year for a already mediocre Detroit Lions team.
Yeah, I think it is, and I do like the Golden Tate signing. I think he's a nice compliment at wide receiver for Calvin Johnson. But ultimately, this is kind of a turning point year for Stafford. He had a really bad year. I know he's the victim of a lot of tipped balls and balls that were dropped, but let's see. They pay this guy a ton of money. Is he a younger version of Tony Romo? He puts up good numbers, but can't put up in the clutch. Hard to say. And then going back to Suh, I've already set the two favorites to sign him next year as the Raiders and the Cowboys. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah. Well, I'd say definitely the Raiders, given their history of really taking almost any, shall we say, cast-off that is out there. I don't know if he would sign with them, but he's definitely going to be offered a contract by the Raiders if he becomes a free agent.
Yeah, I mean it's like taking candy from a kid. But yeah, I mean, and ultimately, Lions. I mean, I'm starting to sound like a broken record here on these preview shows, but do you trust that defense? Much like the Bears, I think the Lions have a worse defense.
Well,
frankly.
and you know, here was the thing was with Stafford. It was when he did the whole winning that last game at the last minute over the Cowboys with stretching across the goal line, which was a great football play that he made, but he went downhill from there. It was as though he pulled out that game, and then all of a sudden it was, hey, you know, I made my great play for the season. That's it. It's done. And he really was not the same from that point forward in the season.
Yeah, and then he had that brutal Monday night game. I forget who it was against, where he just basically handed it back to the opponent.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me about Stafford. I think he's got a little bit of Eli in him, or maybe he tries to do too much and forcing the ball and making interceptions. That's all well and good if you're Derek Carr or Blake Bortles or whoever coming into the league, but Stafford's been in the league for a number of years.
Right.
He's gotten paid. This isn't a guy who's been in the league a year or two, and then that worries me.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of someone just coming into the league, how about, you know, looking at the Minnesota Vikings in that division? Of course, we know about all-day Adrian Peterson, who does not talk to Jerry Jones when he's not supposed to, because that would be tampering, so they didn't do that. And he doesn't want to go to Dallas, by the way. So it's really a matter of, you know, Teddy Bridgewater. Is he going to wind up, you know, at what point, maybe is he going to get a little sniff at quarterback this season there for the Vikings?
I think he will, and you know, everyone says, "Oh, Matt Castle." Well, at least the Vikings are going to break Bridgewater in slowly. And
Yeah.
while I don't think the Vikings by any means are a playoff contender, I think they're an interesting team. They could potentially turn things around. I'm not saying they're going to be this year's version of the Chiefs, but look, you've got AP, the best running back in football, in my opinion. You've got quality wide receivers, and what you've got, not a lot of people are talking about this, in addition to new head coach Mike Zimmer, is Norv Turner. And look, we had a field day picking on Norv over the years when he was a Chargers coach, but like we were saying in our AFC preview, Norv Turner is an excellent coordinator. He's
Right.
not a head coach.
Absolutely.
And look at what he did in Cleveland. People don't remember this. Josh Gordon, before he allegedly inhaled some secondhand smoke, was a leading receiver yardage-wise in football.
Yes.
And that was on a team with a revolving door of quarterbacks and not much else to work with. So, you know, Norv might be able to help Teddy Bridgewater out. And the other thing, too, that will be interesting is not a lot of people realize this. Our favorite bubble, also known as the Metrodome, is no longer. So the Vikings are going to be playing outdoors at the University of Minnesota Stadium.
Yeah.
So be interested to see how that affects the offense or even Bridgewater's development late in the year.
And if there's somehow, I'm sure, when I see those snowy games in December, I'll be seeing Bud Grant standing there on the sideline. I don't know how, but I'm sure that's the first thing that will come into my head when I see snowy games in Minnesota.
Absolutely that, and purple people eaters.
Yep. And okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going with, you know, you got to go with the experience. You got to go with the guy who can get it done in the clutch. You got to go with the guy who has the ring. You got to go with the guy who is arguably the best quarterback in the league right now. So I'm taking Green Bay to win this division.
I have to agree with you.
Okay, so let's real quick, NFC South. Carolina's division last year, they won it at 12-4. It's New Orleans right on their heels at 11-5. But Carolina, you know, Cam Newton now coming off ankle surgery, injured a rib in the preseason, and you know the same things that we talked about with RG3. Is Newton take a few too many hits? Does he need to dial it back a little? Is he letting his ego get in the way maybe a little bit here?
All valid questions, although I think Newton, you know, entering now, was his third year, I believe.
Close enough.
He's learned. Yeah, I think it has been 3, if not 4. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Time's went by, and I'm old. But I think he's learned a little bit. The problem is Newton's going to take hits, and the reason is he has no one to throw to. I mean, other than Greg Olson, who's a tight end, does he have a? I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah, Steve Smith is gone now too, who was his favorite target for a lot of years.
Who's his top receiver? I mean, they really didn't address it in the draft, as far as I'm concerned. Didn't in free agency, and I think ultimately that and the fact that they're playing first pace schedule does not bode well in Carolina.
Yeah. So looking at New Orleans, you know, Darren Sproles is gone now, but Drew Brees still running that offense like a champ. So are we looking at maybe New Orleans getting back to the top of that division. Atlanta was 4-12 last year. Tampa Bay was 4-12, so it'd be tough to think of them maybe taking the division.
Yeah, definitely. I know Lovie Smith coming into Tampa. I think that was a good hire, but
Yeah.
they've got tremendous problems on the offensive line. If you don't believe me, the fact that they let it float out there that they were thinking of signing Richie Incognito before they traded for Logan Mankins says a lot about the quality of your offensive line. But that said, I think Lovey's got some talent to work with, especially at receiver. Vincent Jackson, I think will do a nice job. Doug Martin, will he shake off the sophomore jinx? That's
Right.
another question. And we know Lovey. We know that the Bucs will be ready to play defense. That said, I think they've got another year to restock, and it remains to be seen if McCown's a 16-game quarterback.
And then what about when we look at the Falcons? Really, they were decimated by injuries last year, being completely fair to them. But now Steven Jackson, who was always kind of up and down in his career, but he's going to be healthy. You're going to have Julio Jones back on the outside. You're going to have Roddy White, so he'll have those two big targets. So 4-12 last year, but you'd think they'd have to go at least 500 this year. Are they going to be a playoff team at least?
I think
Falcons?
they are. I think they've got a legit shot to make it to the wild card. And you and I both love to bash Matty Ice, but that's more a function of January.
Right.
I mean, that team just spiraled out of control quicker than I don't know what. And Ryan was one of the most pressured and sacked quarterbacks in the NFL last year. I think they've addressed it with both White and Jones back healthy. I think that will help them. They'll be the beneficiaries of playing a last-place schedule. And I think they could be this year's Chiefs, to go from potentially a worst to first, or at least go from worst to making the playoffs. I don't think they were as bad as they really were. This is not the Houston Texans. This is a team still loaded with a lot of talent on both sides of the ball.
Exactly, and smart thing was not panicking and firing the coach or anything stupid like that there in Atlanta. So
yeah,
let's go ahead and make the pick here. I'm gonna say New Orleans takes it this year.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Well, I'd like to pick the Falcons. I think New Orleans is still a more well-rounded team, and I'll take Sean Payton any day. I mean, as a head coach, I think he's one of the top ones in the league. A lot of people forget this. They went into Seattle and really had a legitimate shot to win it late in the game there, and they really gave the Seahawks a run for their money. They went up winning the division and get some home games. Watch out. There's a contender right there.
Yep, absolutely. So now it comes time. We've looked at all the divisions. We've looked at the entire conference. The NFC in the 2015 Super Bowl will be represented by one of which two teams?
The New Orleans Saints and the San Francisco 49ers.
Ooh, Saints or 49ers, huh?
Yeah, and I think what it'll ultimately come down to is if they play in the NFC Championship, who's got the home game. That said, I think the 49ers have shown they can win on the road. And you say, why are you picking the 49ers? Kaepernick, he's overrated. They've got a ton of holes on defense now with injuries and arrests and suspensions. And, is Frank Gore have anything left in the tank? Is Harbaugh going to be a distraction? I view the 49ers as this year's version of my Super Bowl pick last year, the Broncos. People forget this. When coming into the season, everyone said, well, Peyton's not the same quarterback. They have no one on defense. Who's going to run the ball? And look, they made it to the Super Bowl. And I think that's what's going to happen here with the 49ers. I think this is the year they supplant the Seahawks. Who knows? When things shake out the way they do, they may not even face each other. But I think that Harbaugh, look, I'll throw out my conspiracy theory here. I think he knows this is his last run. I think he's going to coach his butt off. Personally, I think he's got his eyes on the Michigan job in college, but that's just my 2 cents. And I think they know they've got one last run in this team. They're like, we've come close 3 times, and now is the time to do it. That said, I would not be shocked if the Saints, as I said earlier, got home field and ran the table. I know they were my pick to make it from the NFC last year, and I don't see, other than losing Sproles, which is a loss, don't get me wrong, but guy's not running the ball every play. He's more of a receiving threat and a third down back. I think that team's intact, and any team with Drew Brees and Sean Payton scares me.
Well, you know what? I'm going to agree with you halfway here. I'll say it will be New Orleans, but the other team that I still like the Seahawks here because when it comes down to it, you have a lot of teams that pass well, but the teams that win the Super Bowls really are those with the more balanced offense, and it's really about that good ground game, and then Wilson hitting the passes that he needs to. So, and I think home field will play into it though. That it's hard to beat that 12th man in Seattle. So I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks or the New Orleans Saints to win the NFC championship and represent in the Super Bowl.
Well, you're not picking the Giants, Charles. I'm highly offended.
You know what? Honestly, just like you, I want to because I think I look at the Giants. I don't think they could be as bad as they really looked in the preseason. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants turned things around and did something. But, going with, what I see, what I know, I have to say Seattle or New Orleans. But I truly would not be shocked to see the Giants do a 9-7 or a 10-6 and have something spectacular happen.
Yeah, it's true. The problem is our crystal ball is a little foggy, and we can only go with what we see right now, and it doesn't look that good.
Yeah, well, I broke my crystal ball while I was cleaning the garage. It fell off of a shelf in there, so I don't even have mine anymore.
It wasn't the earthquake, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was all me. I'd like to blame Mother Nature, but I can't.
You can blame it on global warming, or I don't know what else can we blame it on? This guy's the new scapegoat, right?
Exactly. All right, so about time to wrap things up here, everybody. So this was our NFC preview show, and remember, you can catch Football Talk every week. We may do it on a different night, but by Thursday of every week during the regular season, you'll have a new show up, and you can check out the games of the week. We do the picks of the week. We analyze what games happened the week before, and we keep you abreast of things. That's myself, Charles E. Smith Jr. Follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. Follow Chris Lardieri on Twitter at Chris L. Sports. Before I sign off here, Chris, any final words?
I'm really looking forward to the season. I will say, and I'll beat this drum, and I know we'll continue to throughout the season, these Thursday night football games, I looked at the matchups. I think it's yet another mistake of the NFL. It's too short of a time for these guys to recover. The matchups they do put on there are some of them either lopsided at best or atrocious at worst. And, Roger Goodell's not going to stop doing it when CBS is ponying up a ton of money and offering up their number one broadcast crew to call the games. So, I think after this Thursday with the Packers and Seahawks, a nice matchup. It's all downhill from here.
Yep. All righty. There you go. That is the eloquent Mr. Chris Lardieri. So I'm Charles E. Smith Jr. Thank you for watching NFL Football Talk, which is an Inside Sports production. And we will see everybody next week.